Well, in recent weeks, you might have noticed a series of articles and editorials about the state's onerous public records law. Editors are demanding reform because police are often arbiters of what's public, like drunk driving records of police. The state is also slow to respond to requests and often demands outrageous fees. So why should you care? If it were not for citizen video, it's likely no one would have known about these incidents involving police on the Boston Common or this one at Roxbury Community College several years ago. That's because the state's public records law allows police control over what can and cannot be released as public record. When the Boston Globe's Todd Wallach asked for the records of 5 police officers charged with drunken driving, he was told the police had the discretion to withhold records. Then there's the little matter of cost. State agencies often ask thousands of dollars to copy records. The Globe reports that 5 years ago, the Boston Redevelopment Authority wanted $47,000 for records about who won the affordable housing lottery. Meanwhile, the whole system is just plain cumbersome. Some FOIA, or Freedom of Information requests, are simply denied or ignored with no response. For instance, Commonwealth Magazine reports today that the Boston 2024 documents that went public this week in Boston Magazine and the Boston Business Journal got there via a circuitous route, not from city officials, but from the University of Massachusetts. Another great example of FOIA appears in the most recent edition of the Boston Courant. Investigative reporter Coleman Herman got hold of some thorny communications over a jurisdictional dispute between state and Boston police. Boston cooperated, the state did not. Bottom line, it's your right to know whether you need to or not. You know, Tom, you'd think Massachusetts, of all states, would have the most open access, but you were editor of the Miami Herald, which is the Sunshine State and all that. They have much more open laws. Why is that?
Well, I think it may have started from the beginning of, in Florida, a lack of trust in the government. So the only way to ensure that the government is doing what the people want is you have to have openness and transparency. I mean, it's fundamental. Our government depends on the consent of the governed, and it needs to be informed consent. And if you don't have access to that information, then the democracy doesn't work. But when I moved from Florida to Massachusetts, it was like walking into a dark room from the bright sunshine. It's amazing to me that the balance in Massachusetts seems to be on the public to try to prove why I should have access to that than the other way around. The government's...
Well, they do hide behind this Corey law, too, which had a good motivation with the Corey, the Criminal Offense and Records Information Law, so that employers aren't discriminating against people with a criminal background. But to get the records of 5 police charged with drunken driving, oh, well, that's a Corey protection. I mean, that is bogus.
My understanding is that at least 1/3 of all the legal language around open records and open meetings is full of the exemptions to that law. Yeah, exactly. And all you need is to just throw a few of those into the gears and it gums everything up.
It's terrible in Massachusetts. The State Integrity Project a few years ago gave Massachusetts an F for its openness to public records. It's completely unacceptable. There were little factoids that come out all the time that just kind of make the hair stand up on the back of your neck. One that came out this week that was terrific was that a guy at a small newspaper in the Lawrence area had FOIA'd some records from the city of Lawrence, and the previous mayor essentially admitted to him that, well, these are public records, but I'm not going to give them to you.
Well, I've had that.
There are absolutely no punishment for me if I refuse to do it, so I'm not going to do it. Finally, a new mayor came in and he got his records, but I mean, this stuff goes on all the time.
This is embarrassing. Massachusetts is one of 4 states to have this antiquated, ridiculous system. It's embarrassing, particularly when you compare with how progressive we are in terms of other laws and people rights. And here's what I think needs to happen more and more. It's happening more. We're getting more coverage about it. I think it was important that 3 local newspapers got together and editorialized about this and explained why this was important. But we have to hone in more with these kinds of examples that you've just given, Dan, because people just don't get why it's important to them. It got to move it away from thinking that this is a media problem and somehow, you know, Boston folks are mad journalists because we don't have access. It's not about our access. It's about what you don't know as a result of this ridiculous law. It's just embarrassing.
And the thing it's important to understand is that it's always been sort of this shell game when it comes to getting open records.
Totally.
I think any journalist knows that no matter what state you're working in. As has been cited in a lot of the stories this week, if it's not just getting the records or them denying the records outright, it's them coming back to you and saying, well, it's actually going to cost us $50,000 to basically make copies. Or they'll say, well, we'll give it to you, but we'll give it to you in information that will basically have no context, will be very redacted, and will basically be rendered useless if you're trying to make something.
On that point, I was talking to Coleman Herman today, who wrote that piece for the Courant, and he was saying that the state police said he had asked specifically for a cease and desist FOIA. He goes, oh, no, we don't have any cease and desist. But he knew exactly what they knew what he was talking about. It was this letter that he had written to police, they had written to Police Commissioner Bill Evans saying, basically, cease and desist from operating, that's our jurisdiction in the seaport, not yours, you got to cut out. So the Boston police provide the information, but the state, because he didn't use the right language. So any kind of smoke and mirrors they can use.
Right. And that's why I think we're seeing that more organizations, media organizations, nonprofits are trying to create tools that make it easier for people to, number one, pinpoint who in the government agencies are the people who are the records collectors, the keepers, and then number two, making it easy to actually request them. Some people are actually just making sort of point-and-click tools where you can make a form letter to make it easy just to say, I want to request a document, because it's become so ridiculous.
But even then, to your point, you'd have to spend thousands of dollars, so who can do that? So in the end, here we are.
Exactly.
No, that's right.
And the enforcement of when you have a mayor like the mayor in Lawrence who just refused to do it because there was no teeth to
The previous mayor.
Also,
The previous
everything
mayor.
is
Right.
digitized.
Yes,
We saw this even in
exactly.
the Tsarnaev trial. They were asking us to pay for copies of the transcripts. Well, of course, one person would pay and then give it to everyone else. But I mean, why? It's just a digital file. Just boom. We weren't asking for hard copies.
I think political leadership has to get involved and realize this is embarrassing.
Well, the political leadership, they exempt themselves from all
exactly.
these laws.
I know that, but
All right.